Again, welcome to the Rhythm Revolution, and please take it away, David.
Hey, thank you. Welcome, everybody, to Not Your Grandfather's Way of Teaching Rhythm. I trust you all brought an open mind to this seminar. To begin, I'd like to tell you just a little bit about myself. I've been a music educator for over 60 years, 30 years in public schools, mostly band, 15 further years as a university methods professor, and since retiring from all teaching, I've had several books on music education published. I need to tell you that this seminar is not a band, orchestra, choir, or piano specific seminar. All music teachers have to teach rhythm. So this is a music seminar. Everything I say will apply to all of us who teach music. Several of the examples I use may well use the word band because that is my experience. But what I say will relate to all ensembles, private lessons, and so forth. My main goal is to share with you some of the most important things I learned during my time as a music educator. So fair warning, I am going to be saying the word I a great deal. I did this, I did that, I believe this, I discovered that, in my view, and on and on and on. Please know that I am not on an ego trip. I'm apologizing in advance for my overuse of the word I. All of the things I have to tell you today are based upon three highly important principles. I call them my foundational principles. I believe they are the bedrock for constructing any successful learning experience, be it calculus, tennis, swimming, music, or whatever. You will be reminded of the importance of these fundamental principles as we progress through our sessions today and tomorrow. And hopefully you will see how important they are in forming a foundation for success. Foundational principle number one says, students must be given the luxury of concentrating on one and only one thing at a time. And I use the word luxury purposely. Allowing students to think of only one thing at a time is something I think we don't do often enough. Second one, students must be given the time they need to master that one thing before we move them on to the next step in the process, a step that hopefully is related to the one just mastered. The essence of successful education is building success upon success upon success, one step at a time. To build a skyscraper, you don't start with the top floor. That's just not going to work. You start with a firm foundation and then you add the first floor, the second floor, the third floor, etc. In my view, this is what a successful educational experience looks like. The most important thing is a sturdy and strong foundation. And the third foundational principle, whenever possible, every new thing when first introduced should cause no confusion. Students must feel successful from the very beginning of any new learning experience. In other words, the new learning experience must start with something they can already do. When we say at the next class, let's do some more of that stuff we started last class, the students are going to be receptive. Why? Because they are just like us. They enjoy being successful. If the thing we introduced last class caused no confusion, they'll be ready for the next installment. If, on the other hand, it confused them, they will not be open to too much more about it. Students do not like to be confused. Confused students probably think that they're the only kid in the class that didn't get it. That's not a good feeling for a child or for adult. I'm going to start the seminar by sharing with you the first and most important thing I learned from my students. And with that, we get down to the reason for this seminar. My students taught me early on that I couldn't teach rhythm to save my soul. It totally baffled me. I never dreamed that I would have trouble teaching rhythm. I could do rhythm myself. I understood it, or so I thought I did. There's much more to that part of this story coming up. In the beginning of my career, it felt to me like I was the quarterback of the young band football team. Everything rhythmically that I threw to my receivers sailed way over their heads. No completions. It seemed that nothing rhythmically that I threw their way was being caught. It really confused me and it frustrated me. That's when I started asking myself this question, which is scrolled across the top of the front cover of my teaching rhythm book. How can something so simple be so difficult to teach? Finding some answers to that question became my passion. It took me several years to figure it out, and I'm here today to hopefully share some of my discoveries with you. I was very near the end of my career teaching middle school band in the public schools. My sixth graders were individually warming up one day, and I was walking among them, dropping a new piece of sheet music on their stands as they were warming up. I had just put the new piece on the trumpet stand where Kevin was warming up. I moved on to the next stand when suddenly somebody behind me was literally screaming at me, "Mr. Newell!" The room fell instantly silent. Not a sound. You could hear a pin drop. It was almost scary. I turned around to see Kevin vigorously shaking the piece of paper in my face and desperately asking, "How's this go?" I was absolutely dumbfounded and speechless, but my mind was racing 100 miles an hour. The dead silence in the room probably lasted for 6 or 7 seconds, but to me, it felt like 6 or 7 minutes. My very first thought was, how could I possibly have forgotten that obnoxious question? I heard it all the time during my first years of teaching, but I had not heard it in well over 20 years. The question, "How's this go?" had somehow become mysteriously extinct in my classroom until that very moment. In retrospect, I now realize why that question irritated me so. Although he didn't realize that Kevin was essentially saying to me, "Mr. Newell, you have not given me the skills I need in order to do what it is you're expecting me to be able to do with this piece of music." Ouch. That hurts coming from an 11 or 12-year-old. I was rescued by Tricia, a student I will never forget because of what she did. She broke the awkward silence and saved me by literally yelling across the room. In a voice fairly dripping with sarcasm and disbelief, she shouted, "What do you mean, how's it go, Kevin? You just read it." Bless you, my child. I'm not sure I would ever have come up with such a wonderfully simple, short, on point, perfect response. You just read it. My students, I guess I should say the overwhelming majority of them, had learned how to solve their own rhythm problems. That's why I had not heard that question in years. The students knew it was their job, not mine, to figure out how it goes. I will be sharing with you just how that happened. And I remind you again, this requires an open mind. During my first several years teaching beginning and second year band students, everything went fine for the first several months. Everything in the method book was in 4/4 time. Is there any other time signature? We'll be talking about that at length. I eventually came to realize that I was not teaching rhythm. The students were just memorizing rhythm facts. All notes are 4 counts, half notes are 2 counts, quarter notes are 1 count. There are 2 eighth notes on 1 count, and so on. And they were doing it really well. I was a happy young teacher until sometime during the spring of those first several years, I would always start thinking, "Oh no, cut time is the next unit in the book. The kids are doing so well, and I know they're going to hate cut time." It happens every year. So every year for those first several years, I would rework my introduction to cut time. I had learned by that time something very important that I need to share with you. If my students were not getting what it was that I was teaching, it was my fault. I truly believed then, and now I am certain of this. Students can learn anything if teachers can figure out how to present it. It's all up to us, my friends. Consider this. When you're looking for the cause of a problem you're having, be it classroom management, tone quality, key signatures, rhythm, student attitude, or whatever, just look in the mirror and you'll be staring at the problem. I know that sounds very harsh, but it gets results and that's what counts. When we don't look in the mirror and we just decide for ourselves, it's them, it's not me, They just don't practice. They just don't care. We feel like we've discovered the reason for the problem, and so we stop searching for a solution and nothing changes. Think about this. If students do not learn the way we teach them, then we must teach them the way they learn. We have to be the agents of change. We have to be, because the students can't do it themselves. We need to think to ourselves, there's got to be a better way to do this. Albert Einstein is alleged to have been the first person who said, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, but expecting different results. That's what I was doing when I was reworking my cut time lessons. Well, this one year I had reworked my introduction to cut time again, and it was magnificent. The best ever. Who says so? I do. I had reworked the darn thing so many times, and this was the one. I was so excited about this one. I couldn't wait to get to class and share this. One of the students in that class that particular year when I premiered my new and improved cut time lesson was named Brian. Brian was a wonderful student. I wish for all of you to have entire classes full of only Brians. This particular Brian, I personally owe much to. He is the one who finally helped me to understand and to drastically fix my rhythm teaching problem. And he did it by asking me a question. And please remember, it was my problem, not my students. They were trying as hard as they could to understand what I was telling them about rhythm. After my magnificent explanation of cut time that day, I asked the students to play the first cut time etude in their books. And of course, I desperately wanted them to be successful. They had to be successful. How could they not be after such a wonderful introduction, right? They played the first easy cut time etude perfectly. But Brian didn't even pick up his instrument. He just frowned and stared at the page. And he was always the first kid in the class ready to play. Of course, I asked him if everything was all right after everyone else finished playing the etude. Are you okay, Brian? He was so confused that he could hardly get the words out. He started out very hesitantly and timidly, but as they went on, he became more and more assertive. Mr. Newell, if the person who wrote this music wanted a 2-count note, why didn't they just write a 2-count note? Meaning, of course, God's own given half note. I don't remember what I said to him, probably something stupid like, I wish you'd pay attention to me when I talk, Brian. In those early years of teaching, if the students didn't get something, it was their fault, not mine, right? After thinking about Brian's question for a few days, I found an answer. The light bulb finally came on. I realized that my students were rhythmically brainwashed, and I had let that happen. They fervently believed, almost religiously believed, that whole notes are 4 counts, but it's not true. So when I tried to present 2-count whole notes in cut time, it was like I was spreading sacrilege among the flock. I'm going to come right out now and say something that you may have never heard, and I hope you will never forget it. We music teachers have been teaching rhythm incorrectly for several centuries, but it's not our fault. Relax, calm down. It's not our fault, but it falls upon us to fix it. Our teachers taught rhythm to us the way their teachers taught it to them. And those teachers taught it the way their teachers taught it to them, and so on back through time. Just because it has lasted so long doesn't make it right. It's time for a change. It's time to move teaching of rhythm into the 21st century. I'm convinced that I can 100% back up these bold and daring statements that I have made if you'll stay with me and keep that open mind until the end of the seminar today and the same time tomorrow. I'm sure you've heard this statement before. Music is both an art and a science. That's one of the reasons it should be a major subject in all schools. And I'm also convinced that music teachers need to be spending more time on the science part of what we do. We need to believe in the science part of our art form. Rhythmic dictation is a simple scientific construct, which we have been teaching unscientifically for a very long time. Teaching science unscientifically is like teaching music unmusically. It's not going to work out very well. For the past 30 years, I've presented clinics at state music teacher conventions and conferences throughout most of the United States, Canada, and abroad. On many of those occasions, I have stated that, in my opinion, rhythm is our profession's biggest time waster, and a proportion of my audiences have immediately turned into bobbleheads. Yeah. While searching for an answer to this question, how can something so simple be so difficult to teach, I discovered some amazing things. Number one, young musicians can indeed sight read anything we put in front of them. I will share with you how that's possible. Two, we can have 100% productive lessons and rehearsals every day, no bad days. Three, we can enjoy vastly improved student retention in our programs, and that is very important to be building successful programs. We have to retain our students. Math teachers don't have to do that. The principal gives them a new bunch of math kids. We have to retain our students. In my middle school, students never had to take another music class after 6th grade. In 6th grade, they had to take band, orchestra, choir, or general music. And after that, they never had to set foot in a music room again. And yet, band students signed up for band year after year after year, right through to graduation. And lastly, we can have pin drop quiet classes and rehearsals, ones in which we never, ever have to raise our voices if we solve the rhythm problem. Now, that's a big order, but I have proof that we can do that. It happened to me. These were just some of the results of my finally figuring out what I'd been teaching rhythm incorrectly for those first several years in the music room. Finding the answer to that problem saved everything for me and for my students. It changed everything. Understanding rhythm is the key to students solving their own rhythm problems. It's not memorizing specific rhythms in a piece of music that they're learning for a concert. When we teach like that, we think we're teaching rhythm. The students are simply learning how to play specific rhythms in that one piece for that one concert, full stop. The learning generally does not carry on to the next pieces. Rhythm, how can something so simple be so difficult to teach? How simple is our system of rhythmic notation? Very simple. It's like a children's story. It all started with an egg. We sophisticated musicians happen to call that egg a whole note, but draw one on a blank piece of paper and ask any 3-year-old, and they would tell you, it's an eggie. Right, Mikey, it's an egg. You're such a bright little guy. Now go take a nap. And these whole note eggs of ours do the same thing that the biological egg does. They split into two half note eggs. And yes, half notes are still eggs. Half notes retain the same basic oval-shaped face as the whole note eggs from which they descended. We're talking the simple biology of rhythmic notation here, cells splitting in two. And then, of course, each half note egg splits into 2 quarter eggs, and on and on and on until we have this simple related family of notes. 1 whole, 2 halves, 4 quarters, 8 eighths, 16 sixteenths, and so on. It's in the shape of a Christmas tree. It is Mother Whole Note's family tree. And the star at the top of the tree is Mother Whole Note. We must respect Mother Whole Note. Without her, there would be no system of rhythmic notation. Think about it. And it all started with a single egg. How elegantly simple. The story is essentially about the birth of rhythmic notation. So what is the science of the family of notes? The family of notes is a simple algebra problem. That's what the science is. And no, I did not use the word algebra with 5th and 6th graders. I use that just when talking to adults. If you personally have a math phobia, by the way, relax. This is the absolute simplest algebra problem there is. It is simply solving for x. All note values in all music are determined by the value of x, and in music, the whole note is x. The whole note is the most important note symbol in all of music. It determines all the note names and values in any piece of music. For those of you who think I'm starting to preach a sermon, let me put it this way, to help you remember what you heard in church this evening. Verily, verily, I say unto you, in the beginning was the whole note, and the whole note was devoid of numerical value. So be it. In algebra and in music, X is not always 4. Want to embarrass yourselves? Next time you cross paths with an algebra teacher in your school, stop and ask him or her, do you have a minute? They'll say, sure. Now get close to them. You don't want to have other people hear you ask this question. You know, I've always wondered, in algebra, how much is X anyway? The algebra teacher's eyeballs are going to disappear up into the forehead. He or she is going to be thinking, this person knows absolutely nothing about algebra. Where do I begin? Far too many of our students know nothing about the simple scientific structure of our system of rhythmic notation. And so I ask you, where do we begin? Well, perhaps right here, right now. In music, our whole note X is a variable. It is not 4. But our students believe that whole notes are 4 counts. Why? Where did they ever get that idea? Well, think about this one example among hundreds. Good morning, band. Let's warm up today by playing the concert E-flat major scale in whole notes. Give me a good sound, nice deep breath. Ready, now. Da, da, and so on. So why do our students believe that whole notes are 4 counts? One reason among many is because, without saying a word, we just told them that. We asked them to play a scale in whole notes. They played each scale degree for 4 counts, and we said, good job. We essentially just told them that we agree with them. They're right. Real whole notes are 4 counts. 2-count whole notes are the illegitimate offspring of real whole notes. And then we wonder why they don't understand or accept cut time. Remember, they passionately, almost religiously believe that whole notes are 4 counts. Thus, the utter confusion of my student, Brian. He could not understand if they wanted a 2-count note, why they didn't just write a 2-count note in the book. Most young students believe that whole notes are 4 counts, half notes are 2, and quarter notes are 1 count. If you don't believe me, just ask them. So who taught our students that quarter notes are 1 count, for instance? Music teachers did. We did. I did. For the first many years of my public school teaching career, I believed that 4/4 was the foundation of rhythmic notation. No one had ever tried to explain the system to me. I just had to come up with my own conclusions. To me, all time signatures were understood by how they were either like or different from 4/4. After all, it's called common time, isn't it? The common foundation, right? Wrong. 4/4 time is more harmful than we understand. It is just a time signature. It is not the time signature. I've personally asked countless thousands upon thousands of highly skilled musicians over the past 40 years to do me a favor. Please sing me a 1-octave major scale up and down in quarter notes. Do not repeat the top pitch, and let me set the tempo. I've asked this of audiences at state, provincial music conventions throughout the United States, Canada, and abroad. I asked the same thing of all my University Methods class students. I once asked an assistant conductor of the Cleveland Orchestra to sing me the scale in quarter notes. And I've always gotten the exact same response from everyone. I give them a starting pitch, I snap tempo, and they sing do, 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 and so on. After a compliment from them for their fine singing, I follow up their performance with a stupid sounding question. I ask them, why did you sing each pitch of the scale for 1 count? I know you were giving them 1 count because I set the tempo, and I set the tempo by snapping my fingers. I did not say 1, 2, ready, sing. I get puzzled looks, even from the assistant conductor of the Cleveland Orchestra. He answered my question this way. Why did you sing each pitch for 1 count? Well, that's what you asked me to do. To which I replied, no, sorry, I didn't. I asked you to sing me the scale in quarter notes. You translated my term quarter notes into 1 count notes. I then asked thousands of people more stupid questions after I heard their performance of the scale. Ever done a piece of music in simple 6/8, which most people call slow 6/8? How many counts are the quarter notes? Right, 2 counts. Ever done a 6/8 march? How long are the quarter notes? Yeah, 2/3 of a count. How about cut time, out of breath? Quarter notes are a half count. Ever run across quarter note triples and cut time? How long is each quarter note in the triplet? Obviously 1/3 of a count. All of us, my friends, have performed 2-count quarter notes, 1-count quarter notes, 2/3 count quarter notes, half count quarter notes, 1/3 count quarter notes. But when I ask highly skilled musicians around the globe to sing me a scale in quarter notes, they have always been 1 count. No exceptions ever. Am I just splitting hairs? No. I'm trying to move boulders by using simple words. And it's not an easy job, I want to tell you. None of our note symbols has a single default numerical value attached to it. That is contrary to the science of the system. There are no numbers automatically attached to any of our note symbols. Our note symbols are assigned a number only when there's a time signature. And by the way, tomorrow we will talk about how hard it is for young people to truly understand the meanings of the numbers and time signatures. The bottom number is especially confusing for them. But if we are willing to move the meaning of time signatures numbers into the 21st century, it becomes the easiest thing imaginable. Total student understanding. And we'll hear about a research study that verifies that. Tune in tomorrow, same time, same station. You have to agree with me, quarter notes are not 1 count by default. When we teach that, we are teaching what I call half-truths. Quarter notes are 1 count, maybe half of the time, when you consider all of the print music that exists in the world today. Music teachers should not be teaching half-truths. Someone I admired very much went even further than half-truth. He called it a lie. I do not use that term because I believe a lie is something you tell people in order to purposely deceive them. I don't believe that any music teacher is purposely trying to deceive his or her students. Gerald Escalin, founder and conductor of the LA Jazz Choir, wrote a great little book. I love the title. If I had thought of this title before he did, it would have been the title of my book on teaching rhythm. His title, Lies My Music Teacher Told Me. You open the front cover, and on the first page there's a dedication. Dedicated to all those who study music just long enough to be thoroughly confused. That's why I bought it. I was thoroughly confused about why my students couldn't understand what I was telling them about rhythm. And lies my music teacher told me, lie number 13, the quarter note gets the beat. I did a YouTube search one time about teaching rhythm. I stumbled onto a video that had already started that had what I assumed were beginning band students standing in front of their chairs and marching vigorously while counting aloud. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. They're having a great time. The teacher then had them all sit down, and while walking toward the whiteboard, the teacher asked them, and which element of music were we marching to? The class shouted, the beat. And that's a great thing. The beat has to be in the body, not just in the brain. And that lesson obviously had been really well taught. Would you like to see what the beat looks like in music? Asked the teacher. Every eyeball was on the board as the teacher drew a quarter note, pointed to it, and said, that is what the beat looks like in music. And I'm sorry, but I have to say it. That's not true. That is going to cause a great deal of confusion down the road. So what do we do about this problem? The answer is so simple and so much fun for students and teachers alike. We have to think outside the box. We need to say to ourselves, there has to be a better way to do this. And then we need to do some imaginative searching for that better way. When I thought outside the rhythm box, the answer came to me, and it changed my life and the lives of my students. It changed the quality of our rehearsals. It changed the rate of retention. It eliminated classroom management problems. In essence, Solving the rhythm problem solved everything. And that is why I am so enthused about sharing this information with you. Thank you very much for being here. Thinking outside the box can be so invigorating and enlightening and fun for both teachers and students. By purposely dismissing practically everything I knew about teaching rhythm, because it apparently wasn't very much, and by imagining what might be possible, I solved my problem. I'll be spending my remaining time, both today and tomorrow, revealing to you my outside the box ideas about rhythmic notation that solved my rhythm teaching problem. This new rhythm revolution that I am advancing can happen immediately, and nothing has to change. It will work with all the music that is in print today. You can start this new way of teaching rhythm tomorrow. Oh, wait a minute. I just misspoke. My fault. One thing does have to change. Teachers have to change the way we teach it. And yes, I just uttered that scary word, change. But remember what I said before. If students do not learn the way we teach them, then we must teach them the way they learn. We have to change, not the students. After Brian helped me figure out what I was doing wrong by asking his question, I walked into my 6th grade second year band class and did some absolutely crazy, way outside the box kinds of things, which it turns out started them on their individual roads to rhythmic independence. I call that day the day of my enlightenment. My young band classes had always started every class with a rote, taught, and memorized 5-pitch warm-up. Concert F down to concert B flat, each pitch held for 4 counts. No notation had ever been associated with those 5 descending pitches. The students had simply learned their routine by rote when they were my 5th grade beginners. To them, it was just what they played when I said, let's warm up. And that same warm up continued in 6th grade. Before the regular warm up on that special day, I did something different. I drew a whole note on the chalkboard. No time signature, no staff, just rhythmic notation's egg. I pointed to it and I said to my students, this morning, we're going to play a whole note on each pitch of our warm-up. And let's give the whole note 7 counts each. Pandemonium erupted. This is not something I should be admitting to you. One of my textbooks is entitled Classroom Management in the Music Room, Pin Drop Quiet Classes and Rehearsals. My then students were all talking loudly all at the same time. You can't do that. Whole notes can't be 7 counts. What do you mean? They were out of control. I purposely chose 7-count whole notes for 2 reasons. They are absolutely bizarre, but also they are absolutely memorable. I knew those students would not forget the day I first had them play 7-count whole notes. I was essentially just getting their attention. And for any of you who think I was just playing stupid games with my students, please stay tuned. You will eventually see how terrifically important the 7-count whole note was to this outside-the-box approach to helping students to understand the science of rhythmic notation. It was not a game. It was very important. It was actually more like a game changer. It did not go well on that first attempt. They didn't mind holding the whole note for 7 counts, but then they wanted to take a 1-count breath. That was that 4/4 box deeply buried in their heads, screaming at them, no, we need 2 measures of our beloved 4/4 time. I immediately taught them to imagine that they were singing to themselves as they played. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4. You change pitches when you hear the little voice in your head singing the word 1. It worked very well. On that first day, we immediately played the warm-up one more time. Let's do one more. Whole notes are 6 counts. Now I got no guff. They just did it. I reminded them to sing up to 6 and to continue changing pitches on count 1. On count 1 of each pitch, I also pointed to the whole note on the chalkboard. The students need to be making visual connection to whole notes with values other than 4. They had essentially all been brainwashed by all their former music teachers and by me into thinking that whole notes are always 4 counts. I needed to deprogram these brainwashed youngsters. Playing whole notes for 7 counts and for 6 counts was just my version of shock therapy. I was just getting their attention. I said nothing about any of this. No explanation whatsoever. We just went on with the assigned lesson for the day, but I knew they were curious, and I knew that I was introducing them to the system of rhythmic notation as it really is. It is the whole note system, and science tells me that the whole note theoretically can have any value attached to it. Stay with me here. These variable count whole note warm-ups continued at the beginning of every class for several weeks. I only saw the students for 30 minutes a week, twice a week, in 8 mixed instrument classes. It was not a great schedule. The warm-up only took maybe 2 minutes a day. The whole note on the board would be 3 counts, then maybe 1 count. They loved half count whole notes. Bum, 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 bum. Extremely important. Several times, the whole notes were 4 counts. The students needed to be thinking to themselves, oh, I see. The 4 count whole notes that we've always done aren't wrong. 4 is just one of the many possible values for whole notes. Why didn't I just tell them that? Perfect time to deliver a little lecture, right? Teachers do love to lecture, don't they? I didn't tell them because it would not have been nearly as effective. Very often when information starts at the teacher's lips, it goes in one ear and out the other of the students. I'm sure that's not news for you. But when information starts right here, when students tell themselves something, the information tends to stay right where it originated. Instead of the teacher talking about whole notes that were different counts, these students were actually doing whole notes with different counts. No explanation necessary at this time. It was essentially just some serious fun. And that brings me to another of those things I want to share with you. I had learned by then that students learn what they do far more profoundly than they learn what we tell them. Telling is not teaching. Experience is the essence of education. 3 important words that all start with the letter E. Experience is the essence of education. Students learn what they do. That's why I didn't tell them a thing about what they were doing. I needed to give them the opportunity to tell themselves that whole notes do not always come with a forever attached value of 4. And on numerous days, those whole note warm-ups included whole notes that were 2 counts, which was purposely very often the case. Remember, I started this outside the box journey because they did not understand or accept cut time with its stupid 2 count whole notes. Now they were doing 2 count whole notes. And because they were doing them, 2 count whole notes no longer seemed so stupid or wrong. So what were my students doing on the days when they were warming up to whole notes with 2 counts? They were essentially playing in cut time. They didn't know it, and they didn't need to know it, so I didn't tell them. But I'll guarantee you this, they were not concerned, upset, confused, or bent out of shape like they had always been when I tried to introduce cut time by using words. Telling is not teaching. Experience is the essence of education. I repeat, students learn what they do far more profoundly than they learn what we tell them. The students were just taking their first baby steps toward cut time, and they didn't even know it. They were learning by doing. I could have told them hundreds of times that whole notes won't always be 4 counts, you know, but they wouldn't have remembered that, especially if every whole note that came after that was still 4 counts. But because they had now experienced whole notes of many different values, they didn't think a thing of it. To them, 2 was actually one of the easier whole note values they've done, far easier than 7. And that is one of the reasons I chose 7 counts for their first outside the box experience with variable count whole notes. 2 count whole notes were no big deal, and no words were necessary. They were simply having their very first cut time experience with absolutely no confusion, no words of explanation from the teacher. They were just doing it. I've often said that I think Nike has the best corporate slogan of all. What is Nike's slogan? Just do it. Don't talk about it. Don't explain it. Just do it. Talk about it later. Please remember, only about 2 minutes of many classes were devoted to giving the students the luxury of concentrating on one simple fact, that whole notes can and will have different values. Once whole note theory was mastered, it was time to move on to the next closely related step in the process. One day I drew a whole note on the board, and instead of telling the students its value, I turned to them and I asked, by the way, how long are whole notes anyway? Doug Kowicki, another student I will never forget, I think his dad was in the military, answered immediately, whole notes are anything you say, sir. I replied, you're absolutely right, Doug. And I say whole notes are 6 counts. The class played 6-count whole notes down the 5-pitch warm-up flawlessly and effortlessly by now, of course. Then, as they watched, I walked to the chalkboard and I drew a stem on the whole note. And I asked them what I had done. You've changed it into a half note. And I said, and why do you suppose they called it a half note? Momentary silence. I don't think any of them had ever thought about why it was called a half note. They had just memorized the way it looked. Okay, I got to remember, that thing's a half note. They were just memorizing what it looked like. They hadn't actually thought about it. And of course, they also memorized that it was 2 counts. Wrong. I finally would get a very hesitant answer about why it was called a half note. Because it's half of a whole note? Absolutely, Rebecca, but don't say it with a question mark at the end. It's called a half note because it's half of a whole note, period. Pretty simple, huh? Pretty good name, don't you think? So class, if the whole note could possibly be 10 counts, just saying, the half note would have to be how many counts? Right. If it wasn't 5 counts, then the name half note wouldn't make any sense, right? And rhythmic notation always makes sense. You can count on it. I never, ever even got a chuckle out of that silly play on words, but I kept trying. We need to take every opportunity we have to make sure that students realize just how simple and logical rhythm theory really is. Right now, a large majority of students think it is very confusing, and they are wrong. We need to correct that. Now, I said, pointing to the half note, we're going to play a half note on each pitch of our scale. But I need to tell you something. Whole notes are still 6. By what you do, you will be showing me whether or not you really, truly understand half notes. Every class I ever had do this exercise from that time on confidently and immediately played 3-count half notes, despite the fact that I purposely counted them off by saying, ready, play. Essentially enticing them, practically begging them to play their beloved 2-count half notes. As I said, every class played 3-count half notes, and I could not wipe the stupid grin off my face. These youngsters truly understood one of the most important scientific elements of our system of rhythmic notation, that all note values depend upon the value of the whole note, and most importantly, they had done the thinking themselves. I never gave them the value of half notes, just the whole notes. They had essentially started their individual journeys down the road to rhythmic independence. They did not need me. They were doing it all themselves. They were starting down the path to individual rhythmic self-esteem. A small step for sure, but actually a giant one at the same time. Outside the box kind of thinking, absolutely, but based on simple common sense, not on oftentimes erroneous memorization. They fully understood the science of the half note. If I had made the mistake of having them do their very first half note warm-up and told them that the whole note was 4 counts, they would have simply relied on their memories. These outside the box whole note values were not just games. They forced students to think instead of just to remember what they had incorrectly memorized. Instead of memorizing rhythms, they were now analyzing them, and that's the key. For the next couple of weeks, every 1 or 2 minute warm-up was done to half notes exclusively, concentrating on one and only one thing at a time. But the students were only ever given the value of the whole note, because it's the whole note that determines all values. They had to think out they had to figure out how long the half notes were themselves, and they found that to be a very simple task. To them, this was really easy. That's a good thing. Students thinking and learning by doing that rhythm theory is easy. The fraction 1/2 is the easiest and best understood of all fractions by all youngsters. Why? because they have done halves for many years. Charles, you must share that cookie half and half with your little sister. Charles has physically created halves, his muscles and his brain working together to perform the task of halfness. I do realize, of course, that's not the best example I could have come up with. Those halves are never really equal, are they? I know. I was a brother to my little sister. It's all okay. Charles is just a young man ahead of his time. He's going to be a jazzer. He's doing jazz eighth notes. One of the halves is a little bigger than the other. Next, of course, I needed to add quarter notes to the 2-minute warm-up mix. Once again, giving only the value of the whole note, because remember, it is the whole note system. All note values in a piece of music depend upon the value of the whole note, and the students must be doing their own thinking. What I'm about to tell you is very, very important. In order to keep the math as simple as possible so that no confusion ever entered into the process, I did not teach the students that a quarter note is 1/4 the value of the whole note, which of course it is. I knew that there would be some students who would not be able to quickly or easily figure out how long the quarter notes needed to be if I wanted the class to do their warm-up playing a quarter note on each pitch with the whole note being 12. Let's see, what's 1/4 of 12? No, that had to be avoided. This whole note system needed to be taught in a way that no confusion ever entered the process. So I told them that quarter notes are simply 1/2 the value of half notes, which of course they are. Starting with quarter notes then, I introduced something that I came to call the Arithmetician Chant. This made-up word of mine, arithmetician, is defined by me as a person who is an expert in the mathematics of musical rhythm, not the performance of musical rhythm, but the understanding of it, how it works, the science of it. The Arithmetician Chant sounded like this: whole, half, quarter, number, half, half. This was chanted rhythmically by the entire class. Remember, we're teaching rhythm. It is best learned if it's done rhythmically, in my view. So I would have put some numbers on the chalkboard before class, so there'd be an 8 and a 12 and a 4, and the class would chant whole, half, quarter, and on that rest, I'd point maybe to the 8. So the whole chant by the students was whole, half, quarter, 8, 4, 2, whole, half, quarter, 12, 6, 3, whole, half, quarter, 4, 2, 1. We were using math to teach music. Over time, this Arithmetician Chant ultimately ended up being whole, half, quarter, 8/16, number, half, 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 16, 8, 4, 2, 1. Every new note was 1/2 the value of the one before it, which is the scientific way the system is designed. It is simple division by twos. This makes the math wonderfully simple. The only math ever required is the easiest of all fractions, 1/2. What could be better? I now know that this Arithmetician Chant is far more valuable than I understood at the time. I encourage you to do this with your students. I am convinced every music student should be able to say whole, half, quarter, 8th, 16th as easily as they say A, B, C, D, E, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. When a classroom full of music students recites whole, half, quarter, 8th, 16th, they are reciting rhythmic notation's DNA strand. That is the system. Whole, half, quarter, 8th, 16th with no set numbers attached. It's as simple as that. When my students were doing the chant effortlessly and really well, we transitioned to playing printed music. I had the students go back to the beginning pages of their method books, those pages that were written in 4/4 time and that used only whole, half, and quarter notes. The instructions for me would be something like this. Turn back in your books to page 7, number 9, kids. I then would simply say, whole notes are 2 counts. The students knew to think to themselves, whole, half, quarter, 2, 1, and a half. They had just told themselves that the quarter notes would be counted 1 and 2 and. Obviously, with whole notes being 2 counts, they were effortlessly playing etudes and songs in cut time, but they had never even heard the term cut time. They knew absolutely nothing about cut time, except how to play it. I personally can't think of a better way to do this. Excuse me. But in order for it to work, the students must know through experience, not through lecture. Some honey. Not through lecture, the whole note has a variable value. My tricking my students into playing in cut time without them even knowing it would not have happened if the students had not had the luxury of concentrating exclusively on whole notes of various values, many of them purposely outlandish, before they were moved on to concentrating on half notes and then quarter notes. Yes, it takes time, but only a couple of minutes a day. We have the time and we need to use it. Once again, I feel certain that many of you, on the day of my enlightenment, when I first had my students play their warm-ups, giving the whole note 7 counts for the very first time, you thought to yourselves, oh man, he's just playing stupid games with his students. It was like a game in a way. The students enjoyed it. It was something new, not same old, but it was actually a very serious game. As I called it before, a serious game changer. As their classmate Doug Kowicki had told them, whole notes are anything Mr. Newell says. And of course, I believe that Mr. Newell always is right. But in the real world, whole notes get their value from time signatures, not from their teacher. Understanding time signature is the easiest way, is all about the whole note, not about the 1 count note. And that's where we start tomorrow. Students must have a clear understanding of the numbers in time signatures. The better that our students understand rhythm, the more time we have to prepare pieces of music for performance. Rhythm will not be the biggest time waster of your day. It will be the best possible use of your time. More about all of this tomorrow. Same time, same station. See you then, and thank you for your time today. Carl, it's all yours.
Thank you so much for that, David. And
You're welcome.
And as a reminder too, just carrying that thought through, we do have a part 2 of this session, which is happening tomorrow at the same time. So if you haven't RSVP'd for that yet, please do so. It'll be in the same invitation that you received. And as promised, we do have a special promotion on many of the products that David mentioned today. So if you're interested in trying those out, this is the perfect opportunity. We have a 25% discount on the Simple Arithmetician, Classic Christmas Carols for Band, which we didn't really go over today, but we want to give you a holiday special, Teaching Rhythm, and Classroom Management. So I will put that info up in the chat right now. Feel free to copy and paste that. All of those titles, you can get 25% off if you go to our website, kjos.com, and use the code rhythm21, and that could be uppercase or lowercase. And of course, we have everything at the landing page link that I've included in there too. So if you're interested, please take advantage of that. That said, we'd love to hear some questions from you if you have any. I noticed that everybody was paying very close attention during the session, David. So maybe we've gone over everything. Let's see. Just some nice comments in the chat today. So thank you, David. Great to hear. All of this.
Carl,
yes.
Carl, Carl, can they all hear me?
Yes.
The Simple Arithmetician, this book right here, almost everything I said today, if you just take some time and look through this book, you'll see, you'll have answers. If I've confused you, it's in here. The start of the Arithmetician Chant, by the 4th etude in this book, kids are playing in cut time because I simply said the whole notes are 2 counts. I'm sure that if I confused you, this book will straighten you out.
Absolutely. And we shared at least one page from the Simple Arithmetician. So it's a great opportunity. Again, 25% off on all those titles if you'd like to try it out. We did have one question come through the chat here. And let me scroll back up to it. Isaac is asking, for the chant starting on 12, what would be the 8th and 16th counts? What would the 8th and 16th counts be? Does that make sense, David, or should we get a little more clarification?
No. When that was when they were only doing quarter notes, it's 12, 6, 3. I just wanted to keep them reminding them of these outlandish numbers because I didn't want them to think this is something I have to memorize. So when the whole note was 12, they were only going down to the quarter, whole, half, quarter, 12, 6, 3. Good question.
Melody Alford is already saying she already uses the simple arithmetician with our ninth graders. It's awesome. So thank you,
Great.
Melody.
Yes, thank you very much.
Good question from Brent Barnett, who says, thanks for offering these sessions. Is there any chance of getting a PD certificate? We don't have a specific certificate just because there are different requirements and we can't really guarantee that administrators or supervisors are going to take those. But I'm happy to provide you with an email showing that you've attended these. So it's up to admin or supervisor. Our company contact information is in the chat now. So if you want to reach out via email and send us a request, I'm happy to provide that to you. Let's see. Oh, we have requests for the link again for the special discount, so I'll throw that in here. And let's see if we've got everything covered. I did see a question in here, David. Someone's asking if this can be used with special needs students. I'm sure that it can, but do you have any tips or advice on that?
I would say that the music teacher or whoever's asking would have to ask the special needs teacher. I mean, would the student get mixed up on 12, 6, 3? I don't know. I would have to ask. You know, I did some general music classes with special needs classes, and they helped me so much. They helped me a great deal.
So yeah, coordinate between those instructors as well.
Absolutely. Guidance counselors.
Lily Burton is asking, will tomorrow's event be available later? We are planning on recording both of these sessions, so we'll put those up. It could be a couple weeks before we were able to edit them and put them up. So we do encourage you to join us if you can. Plus, it'll be another opportunity to ask some questions, and I believe that tomorrow's session will get way more in depth, and so that's a good opportunity if you're able to join us as well. Can you send the link with the promo code and an email? Not able to copy and paste. Absolutely. Again, I would point you to our company contact email, and I'll put that in the chat as well. If you're interested and you just want to write that down, it's simply email@kjos.com. That's email@kjos.com.
And if you have a specific question for me that you think of later, you can email @chos.com, which Carl just told you, and they will forward it to me, and I'd be happy to respond to you.
Absolutely. We'll great point, David, and we'll take care of any questions after the fact. So if you need anything, that email@kjos.com address is a great resource to ask any questions about the promo or anything you saw today, or anything else you'd like to inquire about. So for those of us who are not observant enough to catch the time zone, thinking I was testing things early, will I be able to access a recording of tonight's session? Where would I find that? I will be on tomorrow. Well, yeah, thank you for the question, Michelle. We have recorded tonight's session, and we do plan to put it up in the near future, although it may be a week or two out, just so we can make sure that we've edited it properly. I think we're winding down a bit. So tomorrow is a great opportunity to ask more questions. We want to thank everybody for joining us today. Take advantage of that discount if you want to. Please feel free to contact us if you'd like more information about the promo or getting a letter certifying that you've attended today. And again, if you haven't RSVP'd for tomorrow's event, please do that. It'll be in the invitation, email invitation that you received for this. It's just the second link on there. All right. Thanks so much, David. We will see you again
My
tomorrow.
pleasure.
Have a great evening.